Okay, good morning, everybody. My name's Alistair Grigg. I'm the Managing Director of Fastman. Thank you for joining us on this webinar to celebrate information integrity in the cloud. This is part 3 in a series of webinars that we've been doing, and today we're going to focus on data transformation. So joining me today is Brian Lapointe, who's our VP of Sales, and between the two of us, we're going to give you a bit of an overview of the solutions we offer in this area, and hopefully you'll find this an interesting presentation. So just as a bit of an intro, what we're going to talk about today is some basic principles of information integrity and what Fastman does for our customers, but primarily what customers are looking for in terms of their use of OpenText systems. So for most of our customers, information security and integrity is critical. So if we don't have good information integrity and so on in our systems, then we don't have a sound information content management system, governance, and so on and so forth. So that's what we do primarily. That's what we're about today. Today, we're going to be focusing on one of our solutions around information integrity, which is our data transformation solution set. So our data transformation solution set is one of a number of solutions that we offer. The last presentation we talked about permissions and access controls, focusing primarily on permissions management, access management, and so on. And today we're going to focus, as I mentioned, on data transformation. The other two solutions in our solution sets are around our digital signatures solutions. We're a partner with DocuSign, and of course our technical services. So back to the focus for today. Data transformation, updating data. If you don't have your data in good shape, or you don't have tools and processes in place to bring your data into your information governance platform or your enterprise content management system, then basically you're going to have some fundamental problems with the system itself or with the acceptance of the system. What we've found over the years with information management and with content suite, extended ECM, is that customers want these things that I've got on the screen here right now. They want a trusted and efficient way to automate activities around metadata. They want to make sure their data is in good shape, that it's got good health, and that the governance policies that they've got in place can be easily managed and easily administered. They want to assure that it's established and maintained throughout migrations and also through business as usual scenarios. There's no point in bringing that data into your system if over a period of time you don't have the means to make sure that it is maintained in a consistent and reliable way. So the last thing you want is to have information come through in a sustained, organized migration process and then become out of shape, if you like. And they want to, at the end of the day, a truly reliable information platform. They don't want one that's just sort of as a just make do type situation. So they want a truly reliable information management platform to support their operations so that they can generate value from their data without endless manual work, and they want to be able to do it with confidence. So you'll find that one of the things that's a key message for us with our products and our solutions is trying to make things simple for customers and transparent so that people can see and understand the data they're working with or the situation they're working with. And our data transformation solutions are about that as well. You'll hear the term process, people, process, product a lot, and process is really important, or process is really important. So we provide customers with tools to establish sound, reliable, consistent process. We also believe that customers deserve these tools to automate these routine activities, whether they're records management or just straight data management, information management, but they deserve the tools. There's no point giving them a platform or a system that they can't use effectively. So we're about filling in the gaps and providing tools to be able to do that. And we do want to be able to eliminate those tedious, repeated, endless, error-prone manual processes. So we try and help customers. We try and help them achieve their initial goals from day one, but also to maintain the situation with those systems over a long period of time. After all, the systems we're working with, the OpenText Content Suite extended ECM systems, are not systems that come and go over in a short period of time. They get glued into organizations and generally stay around for a long time. So you need to have that governance and those controls and the tools and the processes in place from day one. Now, our world's becoming a lot more complex. If you think back 10 years ago, and the systems that we're talking about today we had a fairly simplistic view of the world. We had a data storage repository. We had very strong, very good controls and processes around it. But it was, in many organizations, it was very much an island. And we were able to operate that in a holistic, sort of a simplistic way, if you like, sorry. The last 10 years has seen a much greater adoption of integrations between the OpenText content suite system through extended ECM into these other platforms. So the issue becomes harder and harder and harder. So we need to be able to make sure that we've got a set of tools or a set of processes in place that actually do allow customers to do this effectively. Now, the other thing that's happening right now, of course, that we're all talking about and we spend our days dealing with is the fact that we're moving to cloud. Well, people are moving from on-premise environments to cloud. Now, in many ways, I know customers see that as being an attractive solution, and it is in many ways, and we encourage people to be able to take it up where it's appropriate. It does change the perspective somewhat, and we've covered this point in the last webinar as well, but it's relevant here in the same way. And that is that the things you used to do internally, the things you used to be able to have access to yourself without being, without having to go through layers of admin or controls, those things get split up a lot more now. So you have a commercial relationship with an organization that's running your environment. You don't necessarily have direct access to the system that you had before. So you used to be able to write scripts, and you could run scripts, and administer a technical resource could sit beside you and do this work on the system. But nowadays, as we move to the cloud, people are operating far more remotely and far more segmented ways. So you need to be able to enable self-service a lot more, and you need to be able to give the end user the tools they need to do work without having to go to their IT department, who they often these days a lot of the times don't have. So it's very important that we have clarity, and we have a vision around the way in which we allow these people to operate remotely. It's very important. So you would have seen, if you attended our last webinar when we were talking about permissions and access control, you would have seen our triangle of trust we talked about. So we have the same concept here with our data transformation tools. And what we've done with our products is we've consolidated, as I mentioned before, we've consolidated them into a solution set. And in the data transformation field, we have three fundamental aspects to our solution. So we have the metadata bulk updates. So for example, if you've got a system which has got out of kilter for a while, or it's become disorganized, your metadata is no longer consistent, or you're converting from one set of metadata to another, for example, things like that, then you're going to need to do bulk updates. That's not just for that scenario, but it's also for situations, for example, where there's project work underway, and you want to make a bulk change to 15,000 items that are spread around the organization in different places, or the system in different places. So we need to be able to do bulk updates of metadata. And by metadata, I don't just mean categories and attributes. It can be records management data as well. So you need a tool that allows the users to be able to do this remotely and not have to go to IT, not have to go through a centralized process, especially as they move into a more cloud-based model. You need to be able to do content migrations in a consistent way. And by consistent, over the years when we do migrations, it's as much as anything, data migrations are a matter of control. It's a matter of consistency, and it's a matter of understanding the data you've got and where you want to put it and how you want to put it. It's all very well to do a lift and shift, but if you end up with a mess, or you end up with something which isn't optimized for your situation or your business processes, then the migration it fails to meet the optimal outcome, if you like. You don't get your optimal outcome. So we provide tools which allow people to do content migrations in a self-service way, with consistency, and to be able to know exactly what they're getting when they finish their migration, without and seeing the data that they. Oops, sorry, my phone's on. It's beeping away at me on the corner. I apologise for that. So we provide tools to be able to do this in a consistent and controlled fashion. Now, we also remembering that we're talking about self-service here, so we're not talking about tools that require your business users to go off to IT all the time, or a project team to have to work with people to write scripts. We're talking about tools which allow customers and end users or project teams to be able to do this work, in themselves in a consistent way, with all the comfort that they need to make sure that the data is being migrated accurately. And then if they want to be able to check it afterwards, they've got the ways to validate and check and so on and so forth. Lastly, we talk about process orchestration or process orchestration. So we have customers who have requirements which require them to do a lot of repetitive tasks. They might be doing a data transformation. They might be moving from one taxonomy to another. They might be consolidating some categories. They might be doing a number of items with a set of data, but in a controlled, orchestrated way. So we need to provide them with tools to do that. So we've got a process orchestration engine, which we'll talk about in a minute. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Brian. And Brian, rather than talk about the products in a product feature function way, we're going to talk a bit about the products in customer context. So I'm going to hand over to Brian now. And Brian, I'll let you deal with the pickup from here.
Thank you and good morning. And yeah, thank you, Alistair, for the introduction and setting the data transformation table very neatly for us this morning too, of course. So yeah, next up, let's illustrate a few examples where you need to put these capabilities to use. And I appreciate you driving the presentation deck for me this morning, Alistair. And so maybe just go to the next down, and we'll just say here, some of the examples here. Frequently, we see our customers needing to do mass update to their category and attribute data specifically within the Content Suite platform, right? And having a user-friendly spreadsheet view is very helpful in this scenario to populate the changes, and also when you need to break up the job into manageable sets. This is what we mean by visualization and being able to see it. This is also very applicable for records management scenarios too, when you have to make those mass updates too. It's very useful there. Notice this little screenshot from the Fastman Bulk Data Manager application. This is where it lets you visualize in that table format easily, and then easily execute the modifications. Everyone's used to using Excel spreadsheets, but make the changes you want to do, and then process the job safely from your desktop, right? That's the key thing there. Continue on, Alistair, there's other considerations. You may want to schedule, you have the scheduling of the job after hours, right? These things come up. And why do you want to do that? Because you want to conserve valuable system resources that you have. You don't want to do it during the day because it will have impact on your users. You want to run it at night. The other thing you want to do, especially if you're running it at night, you want to apply smart data validation before you process the job, so to avoid any problems during the runtime, right? So, that's the purpose of an application, is to have some of these things built in to help you with the process. Or, how about retaining the creation and modification date when you're doing a data migration? It's coming from another source system, whether shared drive, SharePoint, something like that, and you want to keep those dates are important to you, right? Is it important to you is a question to ask yourself. And then I also find many of my customers, they want to assign the owner during the migration as a best practice too. So the tool is really set up for the way Content Suite, Content Server users are used to seeing and using, managing their data. And then one more point is just worth mentioning here is on your data transformation needs, like they could be a frequent or a reoccurring business process. So having tools to orchestrate this repeatable content process is very helpful, rather than doing it as one-off or custom jobs every time. And it's very useful in scenarios that when you're submitting information into Content Suite. A lot of times it's coming in and it needs to have the right information there, or someone has to do, manage the submittal of it coming into the system. Or, the same thing on the other side of it. If you're transmitting data to another system, how do you handle that? Do you have to do any kind of, orchestrate any kind of, transformation that way? Or anything in the middle, as we all know, using Content Server, the workflow, you can make some changes like that. So let's go on to the next slide, Alistair, and like we were saying, fortunately, Fastman offers several solutions within our data transformation family for you, and they're there to address these types of common needs. Again, for example, being able to deploy a client application to your document controllers that enables them from their desktop to make the changes they need has a real high impact. That's what we find. And gone away is that back and forth with an IT developer using a custom Excel spreadsheet process of some kind. That's just, can be very error prone, let's say. With the Fastman Bulk Data Manager, you get a proven application requiring no scripting, and it has its own built-in spreadsheet interface to see and perform your metadata changes, and that's what makes it very safe. Next up, we also have our bridge connector. This comes in handy when you need to orchestrate a process within your Content Suite platform. It's driven from a dashboard. You're able to monitor the steps and ensure quality control in the process that's involving people, multiple people in multiple jobs for that fact. So, the other nice thing about that, the bridge connector, is that it has built-in integrations to both Permissions Manager from Fastman and Bulk Data Manager. It's just a nice example how you can configure, you can also configure other functional solutions into that orchestrated process. So, it's neat in that fashion. And then lastly, worth mentioning is the Fastman Extract. Essentially what this does, it ensures you can get your data out of Content Suite in a shareable format for other collaborative systems that you may be working with, or just a final destination that you need it to go to. And this is a very powerful application. It brings you peace of mind that you're always in control of your data. And I find it even more valuable as you move to any cloud deployment strategy. In fact, I highly recommend that you have this in place, before you even need it. Again, it's that peace of mind capability. So let's move on. Next slide. Let's talk about a few customer-specific scenarios where data transformation is being applied. Okay. Over the past few months, we've been able to host several Fastman customer spotlights to share best practices with, the Content Suite community. And they really come in handy for these types of presentations too, as we reflect on best practices. We have our friends at the Canadian Nuclear Laboratory as a great example. Curiously, they've named their system ATOM, Canadian Nuclear Laboratory, and ATOM stands for a trove of information, and abbreviated CNL, for Canadian Nuclear Laboratory. They centralized their standard operating procedures. They created a technical document library, and they also manage collaborative working areas for their 3,000 knowledge workers on the Content Suite platform. Okay, that's basically their use case, and more probably. Much of this information that they have in Content Suite came from a legacy engineering system they had, track engineering system they were using. And what they needed to do was to enrich the metadata in Content Suite to ensure that keyword searching was still functional the way the engineers within CNL were used to accessing the information. So it was very critical to make sure it transformed properly. And this is where the update attributes capability of the Fastman BDM is really invaluable. It's just one of the simple scenarios. CNL was able to quickly and safely change the values on existing documents within Content Suite. You can see in this example here, they were able also to process 1,000 documents in 20 minutes. Okay, so they did it in these jobs in different chunks, essentially, is a technical term, as you could say. But ultimately, your performance is really based on your system resources. This is pretty acceptable, and much easier than other alternatives for doing this type of work. And then this is where you really can get, increase the integrity of your information in the system. You can see right here, you also get a nice audit of the completed jobs, and there's no need for any custom scripting either. A knowledge worker, a document controller can run this safely run these jobs. So again, that's the updating of attributes, content that's already in Content Suite. The tool is very useful for that. Let's take a look at another spotlights, Alistair, on the next slide here. Thank you. So yeah, earlier this year, I think in March, we did one. I spoke with Patrick from the government of Northwest Territories, located in Yellowknife, so it's almost as far north as you can go. Very famous, location for the spectacular Northern Lights. They have that display, the aurora, every year, of course. And they essentially operate an on-prem Content Suite system across. They've been doing it for a long time, but it's across 12 departments. And they use it to manage archived email, all their documents. They even use it for physical records too. And frequently they need to import large amounts of files located on shared drives in the Content Suite. This is where the load taxonomy module within BDM comes in real handy for them. It's able to lift and shift the folder structure with the documents while maintaining the original metadata, like the creation date. That's the example where they needed that. That's one of the use cases they have for it. And during this migration process, they can, readily assign category and attribute values on the migration too. I see this load taxonomy functionality being used across the board with all of our customers, where they're consolidating their documents and data into Content Suite. And it can import from any map drive, so it makes it very useful for sources and locations, including like a SharePoint OneDrive, or if you need to bring things in from Box or Dropbox, or again, that the network shared drives is very common. Again, it's very handy that the solution can be run by the users, and it doesn't require any custom coding. And it's the users that know their data, how they want it to come in and how they want it structured. And it just takes the friction out of, putting in an administrative or an IT person that, understands the technology, but doesn't always know how the business is operating. So it gives them more self-service and gives them more control, which is what I like. One more. Let's talk about one more scenario, Alistair, if you would. Thank you. Okay, as I said, one more story. SNOPUD, which is the Sonoma County Public Utility District in Washington State. Back in 2012, they started using Content Suite on-prem. Okay, and they deployed it primarily for records management, and they were consolidating also what they would call their many division folders. So the different departments, divisions, trying to do that consolidation, get off of network drives and centralize this now in the Content Suite. Very typical use case. This essentially involved migrating documents and folder structures from those shared drives to Content Suite. And with BDM, SNOPUD was able to use their knowledge workers from each division to perform the uploads to Content Suite in that safe and structured fashion by leveraging the BDM profiles that are included in the solution. So you do have some central IT control of how you want things done when you give it to the business. It's not like, hey, just do it any which way you want. You can kind of design the tool so they do it in a safe and proper way, but give them the self-service. And that's the beauty of that piece right there. As I've mentioned already along the way here, they started using BDM in that on-premise deployment of Content Suite. And then now today, they actually continue to use the same solution today, but they actually use it after they transition to the OT cloud. So now they're in the cloud. It's this continuity. It was actually a very important consideration when they were making the choice and the decision to go to the cloud, being able to use the same tools they were familiar with and had investments in when they were on-prem, and many people are doing that transition. They want to use the same tools and maintain that same level of self-service as they go to the cloud. BDM helped in the decision to move to the OT cloud sooner, and as they were able to continue using the tool and migrating and bulk updating, their records management, their categories, attributes, and CSP. They used the full suite of the tool. And this is where the solutions are having effect, increasing, essentially maintaining and helping the customers increase that information integrity. And I'd like to thank Lori Goatee for sharing this Fastman story with us last year. I really appreciate all the customers that will talk to us about it. I love sharing the best practices. Okay,
Thanks,
one
Brian.
more slide. I think one more thing here, Alistair. We'll go on to the next one. I thank you. Before I hand this back to Alistair, I just want to encourage you to enable more self-service capabilities to your users. This helps to grow adoption and increase the value for these information management platforms that we've invested in. Plus, you can save some money by doing it yourself and avoid those, there's paid service request fees. These incremental costs can be surprising to an on-prem content suite user that's moving to the cloud, as much of the work was previously handled by your in-house system administrator before you move to the cloud. So thinking about enabling self-service, especially as you go to the cloud, becomes even more important. And then, in summary, this is, I just like to say these are a few examples where, the Fastman data transformation solutions are very valuable in performing, again, metadata updates, content migrations, consolidations, and even content sharing using the Fastman extract is something to think about as you go to the cloud for sure. Having a readily, easily way to share the content or get the information to the right place in the right format that you need to have it. Thinking about that ahead of time rather than when you really need it is a best practice. With that said, I'm happy to hand it back over to you, Alistair, and if you'd like to wrap it up, and then I'll check the chat log here, see how we're doing.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Brian. And that was just a very short overview of the products. If you're interested in looking into the more detail, obviously let us know. But as you were doing this, Brian, I reflected on some of the history and stories we've come across, or the experiences we've had as people do migrations. And one of the problems that we've always had with adoption for these types of systems is user acceptance, right? The user acceptance. And if you drill down into that, a lot of it's about control. It's my data, it's ownership, all those sorts of things come up. And if you've ever been involved in information, like in content management, system deployments, implementations, and when you get to the migration stage, there's always someone in an organization who says, but it's my data. Well, obviously, it's not their data personally, it belongs to the organization. But it's very hard in an organization to break that little bit of resistance. And so these tools allow customers to provide that level of ownership, if you like, or control to the key people in their organization that need it. And a classic was document controllers. So if you think about a controlled environment where you have a document controller or the equivalent thereof, these people are responsible. It's their job description to be able to manage the data, the life of the data as it comes and goes. Like records managers, it's their job to manage the life of records. So we give them tools to be able to do that themselves without having to feel that they are being disconnected or removed from that process, and that they have to rely on someone else. And in the world of cloud, a lot of the decisions are made by IT or by financial people who are less concerned about the experience of the end user. But at the end of the day, well, they provide the end user with a good experience, but at the end of the day, they're relying on the participation and contribution of users to be able to, and the business to be able to make these things successful. So these tools help that a lot. I think that's a key thing. A lot of what Brian's been talking about is the current products, or what we've been talking about is the current products. We're going to talk a little bit now about roadmaps and futures and where these solutions are going over the next sort of 12 to 24 months. Now, the products we're talking about that we've got in the solution set at the moment have been around for a little while. The Bridge Connector is a relatively new product. It's only a year or two old. But the BDM's been around for quite some time, very stable, very proven, still being deployed and used by customers around the world. So it's not as if it's something that we consider to be history. It's very current and very relevant. In fact, as I mentioned, we've been talking about, more relevant now probably than it has been for a long time. And its initial deployment, the first customer that ever rolled it out was an organization that was geographically distributed around the world, and they needed to provide a tool to their teams in remote locations to access central systems. And it really isn't any different to what we come across now with centralized cloud deployments, or even private cloud, internal, and so on. So really, really relevant to think about those, but there is a road forward. You can't stop doing things. What we're doing with Bridge Connector is we're taking on board the same concept that we're using for our access management tools, that's coming out of the world of digital signatures that we've had for 10 years or so, our DocuSign solutions. And we're going to be using, or we're working down towards the concept of profiles. So we're driving out beyond the simple one or two options that we have at the moment to be able to provide customers with the ability to define profiles for process orchestration using this Bridge Connector product. And essentially, it's going to be able to create these rules, which they can use the BDM, they can use the permissions manager, they can use the extract tool, they can use all the other components that we've got, the products we've got, into orchestrated processes which are allowed, which they can then expose to specific users or specific groups of users on specific data in certain locations, all those sorts of considerations. So that's coming in the product in the next 12 months or so, and it's a real game changer for this particular solution. But it also, as Brian described, with the C&L case in particular, it also brings in the functionality of the permissions management, access control. And if you saw our access management or permissions and access management webinar previously, you'll see that we're doing the same thing with access control. So this concept of profiles is becoming very central to our solution sets. And it's really interesting when we start talking about data orchestration or data transformation, so I should say, and we talk about solution sets rather than products, you do have a different perspective. You look at things in a different way. So you look at the life of the data rather than just a specific task that needs to be done. So you realize that the same functions being done in different places in an organization, but in different ways. So you want to have a group in one location that wants to move content from one place to another. You have another group in another part of the organization that wants to work with that data in the same or different locations in the same system, but they have a different perspective on the same thing. So we've got to provide them with the means and the tools to be able to operate in the context of their business operation, but with some similar data, but with multiple orchestration profiles. So that's coming. The other thing that's you've heard us talk about, Brian's talked a bit about BDM here and people using BDM, and this is a product, as we know, that's been around for a while. It's very, very mature. Sometimes in life, you find things that are sort of bleeding obvious. When you see them, they become obvious. Something that you've been working with or living with for a long period of time, and BDM is one of those things for us. It sort of went into a bit of a hiatus for a couple of years, and we felt that maybe the world was moving on, but now the world's come back to it. So as people move to a more centrally controlled, be it private or public, or managed cloud situation, BDM's coming back into its own. However, there are things that you need to do to it to make it relevant. And one of the things that we've found is that for a lot of customers who operate systems like SuccessFactors and so on, who are in controlled environments, that they can't deploy modules to the central system, to their OpenText components, but they still need the functionality that we provide with BDM. And we've had conversations with several customers around this, that we need to provide them with effectively the same functionality, but without the need for that server-side component. So some of the things that Brian talked about in terms of retaining, create, and modify data and so on, traditionally they've relied on our own custom APIs because those functions weren't available inside the OpenText product. Some of those functions, those APIs, have now been made available over the period of time, so there's no reason why we shouldn't use them. So we are going to provide a product which allows what we call BDM Light, which really functionally from an end user perspective isn't going to be much different to the current product. Same rich wizard driven client interface, same data validation, same ability to bring in content either through migrations, create a taxonomy, apply metadata, apply records management, manage all that stuff. All that's available. That's not going to go away. That's all part of the product. Where it will differ will be in the back end processing. And there's some, the number of calls you need to make to the system to do something. If you've got your own module sitting on the server side, it can certainly increase the speed. So those are the sorts of things that where customers will see no difference in terms of functionality, but we will be able to allow them to use the product on a pure lockdown, unmodifiable environment. In the same way you can with the extract tool now. The extract tool we've got, if you're doing regular extracts, you don't need to put a module on the server. It's just point and click using the standard APIs. Also, at the same time with BDM, there's a whole raft of, if you're familiar with the cloud environment, you're working with the cloud environment, there's a raft these days of authentication and related sort of disciplines and standards. Virtually every customer we go to has got different setup, different security policies and so on. So we've got to find a way of, or we've been working with customers to do this on a case-by-case basis, and that's been working fine. It's just a little bit overhead for us, but we're going to make that more transparent and more visible for customers. So the point about these changes that are coming along is that the products are evolving as a set rather than where they were before. They were just in isolation, if you like. And whilst we're talking today about data transformation, our data transformation products, and we're not talking about the permissions and access control products, we actually are finding that they work together very well. So you'll see more of that over the next little while. This is just about us. We get to the point when you get the slide deck, you'll see all this. If you want some information about Fastman, here's some of the customers. Brian's talked about a couple of them today. These products that we're talking about here have been in use and are being in use around the world. Actually, I saw one of our customers had a major project go live overnight, which was really satisfying when you get onto the I can't mention their name unfortunately, but you get onto the newspapers and you see that and you know that your product's been involved in that project. It's very satisfying indeed. Now, the last thing we'll talk about, one of the boxes in that slide we started with was our Fastman services. So traditionally, we have been focusing our service offerings in Australia and in related areas, so APJ. We are going to be increasingly offering those to our customers. We're finding more and more customers are coming to us, not to replace the work that they do themselves or with their other partners around system deployment and upgrades and maintenance and support, but more about getting better value from these processes that we're supporting with these products. So be ready to hear something about those in the next little while. And on that, all I'm left to do is to give you some contact details. So look, I hope it's been an interesting session for you today. We've sort of run through things at a fairly crisp rate. I think there were a couple of questions came in if anybody wants to talk about those. But the key message here is that the products and the solution set is relevant to what people are doing right now and is increasingly relevant as people move to a situation where they want to have self-service much more tightly embedded into their organization and much more available for customers, for their internal customers, I say, user bases and so on. Have we got any questions at all?
Yeah, we definitely do, Alistair. I got a couple here. Let me shoot them out to you here. Let's go.
Thank you.
So here's one. I got a customer that needs to load a large quantity of emails. It looks like email files and voicemails for archival. They were asking about constraints, transmission throughput, file type limitations, that type of question.
Yeah, so the emails, we've certainly had customers doing that. We can help them with that one, and the best thing for me would be to get David to be involved in that one, Brian. It's not something that I'm personally that familiar with, but I know that we've had customers do it. There is a mapping exercise required for the specific data format for emails, and I know that we've worked with customers on that in the past. The data the transmission speed, was that one of the other things you mentioned?
Yeah, that was part of it. Yep.
Yeah, so one of the problems customers often have, or one of the things that they see as a problem up front, is that data has to come from remote locations to be migrated into their content server systems, and increasingly those content server or extended ECM systems are centralized. If you've got a lot of data coming from multiple locations, then there are certainly things you can do to improve that, which we can advise on and help with. It doesn't have to be a roadblock and a showstopper, and we've certainly had customers doing terabytes of data from remote locations around the world into centralized systems, and I can immediately think of customers where we've done that with them. And again, a lot of it comes down to discipline and process, rather than just expecting the tool to do it all for you. The tool does the job. But you've also got to get the best outcome, you've got to follow some fairly sort of logical processes, if you like. But as I said, that helps.
No, I think on that email or the voicemail upload, I think the BDM can bring in any file type. It's just sometimes on the back end how you want it displayed in Content Suite, and that's where some of our expertise comes in. I know David had consulted with customers. It's the MIME types, so it's kind of a Content Suite feature, how you configure the MIME types so that you can just open the files up, quickly and easily in Content Suite. So it's very doable. People use it all the time to archive their email, upload emails, and
you're right. You're absolutely right. It's not about you can bring the data in. That's not a problem at all. It's just, as you say, it's the back end.
It's usable and displaying it in a usable, and that's where these areas, data transformation, access permissions, that's our domain expertise. And so we like the challenges and the questions, I guess.
Yeah, and it highlights one of the key points here, and that's that it's all very well to bring data in an ad hoc fashion. If you give end users the ability to be able to do things without some sort of control in place or some sort of defined process in place, then it's very, very easy and very quick to end up with this bigger problem once you've got the data into the system as you started with outside. And I'm not going to name customers here, but we've certainly had experience, and one or two of the people we've highlighted. That's one of the reasons they use our products, because they've allowed those people to bring data in a totally random fashion, or to get things done quickly without consideration of what the end game is that they want. What do they want at the end of the day? So you've got to have a nice balance between giving the customers, or the end users, the ability to be able to do this, but also make sure that there's some consistency and policy applied, and it's visible, it's transparent. You can't, it's all very well to be able to do it, but if you can't see it and you can't manage it, what's the point? So I think that's a lot of the learnings we've had over the years working with this in this area. And that's why I think customers keep using these products. They can, as you know, working with customers, we're constantly having people coming back with new use cases. They might be an existing customer, they've had the product for a number of years, but they come back and say, we want to use it for this use case. And they do the right thing. They come back and they describe the use case and the outcome they're after. And then they allow the minds to get together and map out the process that they want to follow to achieve the outcome that they need, rather than just saying, hey, I'm going to carte blanche, give people random ability to be able to drag and drop content into our system. It doesn't help anybody. And sometimes that's what they need. They just want an archiving engine. They just want to be able to get stuff off file shares and into some place that they can manage. But a lot of times it's not what they need at all. So, sorry, I'm off on a rant.
No, it's fine. I got a message here from Eric, and there's somewhat of a gold build on a managed service up in Canada, as you're probably familiar with, Alistair. And he was asking, and I think this leads to your BDM Light, question, like, has anyone installed BDM in that environment?
It's a good question, Eric. We'll get back to you directly about that. The answer is that we have had a customer use BDM in the GC Docs systems, but I don't believe it was in the gold build. So we'll get back to you, Eric, about that directly. Yeah.
Well, I think the issue is it can be, of course, it just has to be allowed to install the bits that need to be installed. The point of BDM Light is that you won't need those bits anymore and be able to
you could have a mix, and you can also have a mix. Here's an interesting point. If you had a situation like that where you've got a controlled environment where you want to be able to validate and verify a module, so the server-side piece we're talking about with BDM is just an OScript module. It's no different to Permissions Manager in that situation where Permissions Manager is part of the gold build, and so therefore it does get deployed as part of those systems. BDM would be exactly the same, but you could have a mix if you wanted to, where you could have some systems in that environment that have the module installed, and and some of the departments don't use the module. You could do that. The end user experience would be exactly the same. They actually wouldn't know the difference.
Right.
But the people responsible for running the systems and operating the systems would be able to comply with the different policies. That makes sense?
For sure.
I think that's an interesting question, actually.
You got time for another one?
Yeah, we're going fine.
So I got a little softball one here, it looks like. What's an example of and why an end user would want to bulk update the metadata?
Yeah, I saw that. It's really quite interesting because when I answer that question, I don't know where to stop. Obviously, controlled environment, controlled doc control, for example, or the equivalent thereof in any organization. They often want to be able to do bulk updates. So they're doing project lifecycle type thing, and they want to go and say, mark all these documents that have been processed or updated with certain metadata. So I'm going to release them, for example. You might have a status. That's one scenario. Another scenario is where someone has gone in and imported data and put in the wrong data. Now that's not unusual. If you've got a fairly big migration taking place and somebody comes along and makes a mistake, honest mistake, then you need to be able to go and fix that. Now BDM will let you do that, and we have a save search function or a search function inside BDM, so you can simply go and find everything that have been added by certain people with certain metadata, and then make a bulk change against that information, regardless of where it is in the system. So there's the second scenario. There's always situations. If you've ever been responsible for managing a database of any sort, a customer database or a financial database, there's always data anomalies that you want to fix. Unless you've got some automated tools in there, and there are tools around to do this to normalize your data and so on. But even when you've got multiple selections in a drop-down list, people make mistakes. Or people have changes. So there's a whole raft of scenarios where it's relevant for people to be able to make bulk changes. The other point I would say is that oftentimes if you don't have visibility of these things, you don't realize that the data is not right. So sometimes, if we've come up with a situation where people say, I can't find data. And it's not necessarily that the data is not there. Oftentimes it's because the data has been imported or added incorrectly, that the metadata that's been put in is incorrect. So I could go on, and there's a whole raft of situations, I think, where you do need to bulk update data, and of course records managers.
That CNL use case is a prime example where they migrated a legacy system in. The engineers, if I recall, in the old legacy, like a lot of legacy document management systems, you do keyword searches. That's how you found it. So They were doing that for 15 years or 20 years, a long time in that organization. So when it came into Content Suite, they needed to be able to do the searches the same way, because that's how the company, the users remember how to search for stuff. So they still wanted to do those keyword searches. So you had to make sure that could occur, and that's where the bulk updates have a big impact, because you can search and find the stuff the way you're used to finding it.
And we also had a customer that had a two-stage migration process where they needed that users would be or business users out in the field were using the tool to migrate it into the system, and then someone else would come along afterwards and do the data cleansing. And they would use BDM to do the bulk updates based on the rules that are set in place. So they didn't require the end users to be able to complete all of the metadata, but then they needed to normalize it and process it using their sort of stage 2 rules. So I thought that was an interesting use case as well. So
I got one more for you. Does the Content Suite extract solution need a dedicated server? What metadata does it include?
No, it doesn't. The extract tool for just point and shoot, basically. You just point it at the source that you want to be able to extract, and it pulls it down. You don't need to put a server-side component on. Was that the question?
That's what it reads like.
Yeah, it's funny. We run it when we do demonstrations of it. We run it on our cloud demo system, as you know, which runs on Azure, and we run it, and it runs locally on the PC, but it just uses the standard APIs.
And you can get the category and attribute data out too, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Cats and ats and you can bring out an XML, you can bring out the structure, you can bring out the versions. So customers have used it both for business as usual situations, when they're doing regular transmissions of data and they don't want to use the big modules from Content Suite, but they can use it for that situation. And we've had other customers that just want to pull a segment of data out, so they're doing disinvestment of a business unit being sold off to another company. They need to pull the data out. They need to give it to them in a format that they can use it in the system they're going to ingest it into. So we can come out. There's a bunch of different options around it, but the XML is certainly provided. And that one of the problems with exporting data out of Content Suite is as people here probably know, is that file length. So when you pull it out of Content Suite, extract it, it's got a path which is fully supported inside OpenText. But when you put it onto a file share, you end up with a file name that breaks the rules. So you have a little squiggle on the end of it, tilde, isn't it? And so we have that in XML. So that's something else we deal with, which is a common thing.
Yeah, I had a customer. I think it was project based. So there was an engineering team that was using maybe ProjectWise or something like that. So they needed those engineering documents out with the metadata, and they needed the other system to ingest it for a specific project team, because that's where they were doing that type of work, right?
Yep.
So they needed to easily pull out large quantities that were related to that project, so they could search and then export it, and then have the other the team could work on it as they needed to with the other applications they were working with.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, actually, Eric had another question too. He said, "Where is it? Is it possible to put the extractor onto your local computer?" Absolutely. You decide wherever you want it, but by default, it'll put it on your local machine. So yeah.
Yeah, Eric's full of questions.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good questions. So
I think we covered it, Alistair. I thank you for having me here today. This was good.
No, thank you very much. There actually are a couple of other questions. We'll get back to people directly about that. We apologise for if we haven't been able to address your questions on the call. So thanks, Brian, and thank you, Victoria, for organising this. Thank you, everybody, for attending. I hope you found it useful.